Hi, Internet. This is Annalisa Lukes and Jay Lukes in the background there from the Lukes Network. We are here coming to you live on Instagram TV from Tablas Creek Vineyard. And we are so privileged and honored to have Jason Haas here with us for the next few minutes as we talk with him about winemaking in general, but really about sustainability and what that means. As you know, we're a sustainability-oriented marketing firm, and we always want to know how we can always leave the land better than we found it. Right, Jason?
If there's not something which is more in keeping with the way that a winery should think, I don't know what is.
So let's go a little bit into that. I mean, Tablas Creek is a big name and has been for quite some time. You were named one of the top, 50, top 100 and a few years ago, a couple of years in a row. But tell us the roots in a nutshell of Tablas Creek. We know you've got a partnership with Chateau de Beaucastel in the Rhone region.
Yeah, so Tablas Creek was always conceived of as a partnership. It's equally owned and run by two families. One of the families is my family. My dad was a wine importer for his main adult career. The other family is the Perrin family from Chateau de Beaucastel in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, whose wine my dad represented as their importer starting in the 1960s. So they came up with the idea of doing a Rhone project together in California using the same grapes that they were used to working with in Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the mid-70s. It took them a long time to get the money saved up and help with their other businesses, but in 85 they started looking for a spot, and in 89 bought 120 acres here in the hills west of Paso. We realized pretty quickly that several of the grape varieties we wanted to work with had never been used in California before. So almost the first thing that we did was take cuttings of some of the vines at Beaucastel, bring them into the country, waited 3 years for them to clear a U.S. government mandated quarantine.
3 years, did you say?
I did. Yeah, 3 years.
Okay.
And then built a grapevine nursery to propagate the 6 cuttings you're allowed to bring in of each type into the thousands you need to start planting a vineyard. So it's a very long, slow development. Wow. We bought the property in 89. We got vines on the ground finally in 94. And then it takes 3 years to get your first crop. So that was 97.
That's quite a long investment of time and patience.
Yes.
Hopes and emotions, I'm sure, right? But having started from all that and having done all of that to get to where you are, at what point did you realize, and maybe it was pretty soon thereafter, that sustainability and biodynamic farming is something that you were going to be a leader in?
Well, Beaucastel has been fully organic since the 1960s.
Okay.
So we came in with that as our baseline, feeling like that was one of the ways that we were going to make sure that the wines that we made here tasted like this place and couldn't have been made anywhere else. And it was really that conviction, the idea that we were trying to minimize what we were going to put on from outside and try to produce everything here that led us from organics to biodynamics gradually over the next couple of decades, where like a good example would be like it's better to use organic fertilizer than it is to use chemical fertilizer, but wouldn't it be better to have our own flock of sheep create our own fertilizer from their manure from our own weeds? Yeah, it would, because again, that's one thing that we don't have to bring in from the outside. We also then don't have to run our tractors through the vineyard as much and compact the soil to get rid of the weeds. It all kind of takes care of itself.
Self-sustaining and really even probably more advanced than organic, and because I read that biodynamic farming actually predated organic farming to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is really they're going after similar ends, but it's a very different kind of process. Organic is essentially a list of things you can't use.
Yeah.
So if you want to be organic, you have to not use chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and chemical herbicides. Like you do that, you go through an audit, you're organic. Biodynamics is essentially the effort to create a healthy ecosystem in your farm so that you don't need to intervene, whether with chemicals or non-chemical means, because you have a habitat for the insects that are going to take care of the pests you don't want. You have some way of turning your soil into something with more life and more fertility just through natural processes every year. So it's a much more kind of holistic way to think about sustainability than organic, which is often involves like substituting a non-chemical product for a chemical product.
Got it. And really you're creating everything from within your ecosystem and keeping it internal, right?
I mean, we figure like the less we bring in from the outside, the better chance we have for our wines to taste really intensely of this place.
That's amazing. And so how does that, if at all, affect production? does it affect the volume that you produce, or did it affect the volume you produce, or is there an impact on that end? Because winemaking and wine is also a business, right? In addition to all the other things. It's an art. It's an art and a business.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer that question.
That's
just
okay.
because it's not like we have a before and after. It's
Yeah.
not like we have we used to be farming chemically in a modern way.
Yeah.
Now we're farming biodynamically. And
Yeah.
I can tell you, before it cost us X per acre,
Right.
now it costs us Y. So what I can say is that, I mean, we're able to get a solid yield in terms of tons per acre. I mean, it's not huge. We get something like 2.5 tons an acre, which is not a big number, but it's enough. The vines are incredibly healthy and become more resilient every year because they are set up to succeed. They're given soils that are in great shape. They're given an ecosystem that supports them. And we know that whereas a lot of our neighbors have to replant grapevines at 20 or 25 years old just because they get exhausted, our vines, I mean, our oldest vines will be 30 next year, and they're still going strong. So I feel like there's a real quality benefit in the long run. And if there are costs, the costs are mostly at the front end as you're getting your ecosystem set up. And once it's established, it should be pretty self-sustaining.
Now, I know you're in the middle of harvest, so it's really kind of generous of you to spend a little bit of time here, and they're also in the middle of releasing, introducing some of their newer wines. And, you know, he travels typically quite a bit to talk about Tablas Creek and engage restaurants all over the country in big cities, which Orange County he was just in, a week or so ago. But going back to the ecosystem, tell us about what that looks like here on your property, 120 acres on the west side.
So we have 120 acres of vineyard from our original property, and then we bought the next parcel to the south of us 10 years ago, more or less. So that's another 150 acres. So we've got 270 acres. Of that, we have about 105 acres of producing vineyard. So vines that we planted mostly in the mid to late 90s. Then we have another 20 acres of newly planted vineyard that's not in production yet. Another 40 acres of land that is just grassland that was on the new property that we bought that had been a walnut orchard that we pulled the walnuts out and had been grazing our flock of sheep over there and building that soil fertility and getting ready to plant. So that will be planted in the next decade, little by little. And then we've got about 80 acres of forest land, wild oak woodland, that is going to stay as it is, and it provides a habitat for all sorts of important animals and insects and birds, and provides a lot of the beauty that I think people look forward to and come into Paso Robles. So it's a diverse ecosystem within that in that property. And then on the property, in addition to the grapevines, we've got a flock of 200 sheep. We had our first lambs of the season day before yesterday.
Wow.
So if you come back in 6 weeks, we'll have 200 sheep and 250 lambs running around. We've also got a couple of big Spanish Mastiffs that keep the flock safe from mountain lions and coyotes. We've got a couple of alpacas and a donkey just for local color. And then in addition to the grapevines, we've interplanted several hundred fruit trees around the vineyard because each different species of plant that you have attracts a slightly different collection of insects and provides microbes for the soil to have a kind of healthy, resilient soil.
Now, was that something that was designed particularly for the soil that's in this area, or is that a typical combination of what a biodynamic ecosystem and wine farming would be?
So the specific plants that you might have would vary. If you're in a Mediterranean climate like we are, it would be different than if you're in a continental climate or a say a grassland climate. But the idea of having not just your crop, but also a diverse collection of other plants, other perennial plants that do well in that climate, and then trying to incorporate animals however you can, because if you think of your normal farm unit, like there's no animals, and that's an unnatural ecosystem, because animals play a really crucial role of acting as composters. They eat woody or leafy or grassy material and turn it into soil. And so They also hold microbes in their guts, which is
Yeah.
particularly important in a dry climate like this, where it rains only in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out a way to incorporate animals into this biodiverse ecosystem is a really central tenet of biodynamics, and one of the things that we feel like is one of the keys to succeeding in doing it.
I'll ask a couple more questions because, again, Jason's in harvest right now. So the first question would be, if you were to describe, we'll say, use 2 or 3 words to describe how this place tastes, what would the words be?
So I think what defines the wines that we make here are basically vibrancy and balance and minerality. So vibrancy in the sense that sometimes wines can taste just like fruit or just like tannin, be kind of these dense, powerful things. One of the contributions of biodynamic farming, and also one of the contributions of the Paso Robles climate, is this lift. So you have these denser elements, but you've also got like freshness and floral and brightness to them. So that vibrancy is one piece. The second, and this is really something that we inherit from our partners at Beaucastel, is balance. Like, we want fruit, but we want the fruit to be in balance with spice and minerality and herbs and tannin, and we don't want any one of those to dominate. We want aspects of all of them. And then finally, minerality. You can probably see behind us this great limestone soil that we have. It's this kind of white chalky rock that you can find every road cut that you drive by in Paso Robles. This is the bedrock in a lot of the great wine regions in Europe, but it's rare in California. And it's why we're in Paso Robles and not in Sonoma or Napa or the Sierra foothills that also have a climate that's similar to this. And one of the contributions of these soils is this almost saline, like sea spray finish on the wines. And I love the way that kind of highlights the fruit and the freshness and keeps it balanced and keeps it clean.
Wow, that's amazing. Very illustrative words. I want a glass now. Okay, I said that was the last question, but really, what would you want the legacy of Tablas Creek to be? So generations from now, because that's part of what sustainability is about, is thinking not just about now, but into the future, long after we've moved on.
So I spent a lot of time thinking about that, actually. And I feel like we have a chance to leave 2 significant legacies. One is that we were one of the pioneers of the California Rhone movement. And when we brought in cuttings of all of our grapes from Beaucastel, we made the decision early on that we weren't going to try to keep those grapes proprietary, but we're instead going to make them available to the broader community. And we've sold 5 million grapevine cuttings to 600 vineyards from Washington State to Virginia. I feel like that kind of flowering of this whole family of grape varieties is one of the things that you can trace directly back to that decision that we made. So that's one. The other is that last year we became the first winery in the world to be certified regenerative organic. So that is a framework which builds on biodynamic, but also includes commitments to reducing your use of resources like energy and water. For example, we're 100% solar powered here, and we're largely dry farmed, so we don't have to pull out groundwater to irrigate. It also includes commitments to animal welfare. So the flock of sheep that we have has an animal welfare certification that they're treated humanely. And then finally, a farm worker fairness pillar where it shows you have to be audited to show that not only are you paying your farm workers a living wage, not only are their working conditions safe, but also you are soliciting and encouraging and acting upon their feedback. We do roundtable discussions every Friday all through the growing season, all through the harvest with our field crew, and talk about what we've done, talk about what we have coming up, and get their suggestions and get their ideas. So to show the guys who have their boots on the ground and their hands on the vines, that their input is not just allowed but welcomed.
Well, that's wonderful. So at the Luke's Network, we talk about the triple bottom line: people, profit, planet, do well and do good. But on the people side, it's employee engagement. It sounds like you've got that spot on. We're asking people, the people that you really are, they're your first customers. they're your frontline customers, about their feedback is what propels businesses forward.
I totally agree.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the other P, which is in terms of where we can get your wine. Obviously, you can come to Paso Robles here in beautiful.
Please do come to Paso Robles.
Paso
It's a wonderful place.
It's only 4.5 hours from South Orange County, about 3.5 from Los Angeles. But where else could we purchase your wine?
So the easiest place to start, because we're not a huge winery, but we do have distribution, at least in a limited way, in most markets. So the easiest thing to do is if you go onto our website, which is just tablascreek.com.
Yeah.
There is a section under wines called Find Our Wine, and you can plug in where you are, and all of the restaurants or wine shops that have our wines that are near you will pop up.
Great.
And then there's always wines that we make that don't make it into distribution, things that are scarce that we just sell here. So while you're on that website, you can also check those out.
And you can become a member.
And you can become a wine club member.
Because then you can have access to all that. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I hope we get to do this again, perhaps in a different season. We really appreciate, on behalf of Jay and myself, Annalisa Lukes, we appreciate the time that you spent with us, and the insight and the passion, the transparency, the authenticity. These are all words that we value as a firm. So thank you so much. And
totally my pleasure.
come to Tablas Creek. Check it out.
Thanks, everybody.
It's very different and great. Okay, are we good?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right, man. And you actually gave great answers. They were just fantastic, man.
Which one of it?